Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the new WDC program. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Diana Conway. I'm the president of the Women's Democratic Club, and I just want to welcome everybody for our program. I've got a couple of announcements, and then we're going to hear from our guest, County Executive Marc Elrich. We will have some Q&A at that point. First, some announcements. Scott, can I get the... We are a vibrant network of politically active women and men. I want to first encourage everyone to please join WDC and volunteer to phone bank, join a committee, get involved with voter protection, and make sure you and your friends, please, have a plan to vote. These are the WDC committees. They're also on our website, www.womensdemocraticclub.org, at the bottom of our slides. We've got some great upcoming events. Fred Yang, I think many of you may remember from prior years, our Democratic pollster, who's very generously joining us. County Council member at large, Will Jawando, is going to be talking primarily about criminal justice reform at both the county and state level. On November 23rd, Judge Nicole Bershon is, I think I've got that right, Bershon is going to be talking about the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage and what's left to do. And I'm particularly excited by our newest speaker that we've secured. Carol Bogert is the president of the Marshall Project, which is just a tremendous new 20-year-old organization of independent, nonpartisan journalists focusing on criminal justice reform, and within 2 years of their existence, they won a Pulitzer. So they're doing good work. Also would love to invite you to join some fall watch parties. You'll see the October 15th date is missing. We're not quite sure what's going on the 15th. If there is, in fact, a town hall that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to host, we will, of course, add that to our list. But these are the ones we know about for now. And that's hosted by Montgomery, MoCo Women and Maryland Women for Biden, and of course, WDC. Make a plan to vote. Today is literally the final day by 9 p.m. to register to vote. You can also register on the day of, but let's get it going, please, if you know anybody who hasn't done it yet. And I'm going to invite you to kindly put some questions into the Q&A chat at the bottom of your screen. Before we get to our speaker, I just want to run through a couple points to remind you how critical this is. First is the Fifth Circuit, I think this morning, overturned a lower court judge's decision, which had been an injunction against Governor Abbott in Texas, limiting each county to a single ballot drop box. Unfortunately, the Fifth Circuit cited the fact that a single drop box in each county doesn't affect voters' right to mail in their ballots. As we know, there are mail issues. So it's another reminder how vital it is to protect our post office and also to make vote by mail a universal option that runs a little more smoothly. You will hear this from Marc, but I wanted to point out that all the Democratic clubs are in support of voting for voting as follows for the ballot questions. For question A, against question B, for question C, and against question D. All of this is on the Democratic Club's websites, including ours, but the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee has sort of the home base for that. As Rich Madaleno put it recently from Marc's cabinet, passing question B would put the county into a fiscal death spiral. If you want to see more about that, in addition to hearing from Marc, there will be, the Friends of White Flint had a program last night between Robin Ficker, who's the sponsor of question B, and Andrew Friedson, who's the sponsor of question A. And as the seventh state put it, Friedson floors Ficker on taxes. I want to point out that the Maryland Board of Elections, if you want to see where your ballot is, you can go to their website and simply enter your name, date of birth, and zip code, and you can find out where your ballot is in the process. There are 35,657 ballots that were requested by internet delivery, which means they have to be scanned by hand. Of the 636,000 active registered voters in the county, 305,000 requested vote by mail ballots, which is just tremendous, but also a little alarming given the post office. And I wanted to point out especially a recent item from the New England Journal of Medicine, which in a completely unprecedented and extraordinary move put out an editorial by their editorial board called "Dying in a Leadership Vacuum." This is from October 8th. And they call on readers to reject Trump and Pence for being, quote, dangerously incompetent. And quote, here in the United States, our leaders have failed, have taken a crisis and turned it into a tragedy. The magnitude of this failure is astonishing. When it comes to the response to the largest public health crisis of our time, our current political leaders have demonstrated they are dangerously incompetent. We should not abet them and enable the deaths of thousands more Americans by allowing them to keep their jobs. I think most of you know enough about independent medical journals, peer-reviewed journals to know that that is quite outside the norm. With that, let's see, let's get to our guest, Marc Elrich. So Marc is our county executive. He was elected 2 years ago, and he's made a number of initiatives, his sort of flagship initiatives. Of course, this all started before COVID, but the early care initiative for better access to pre-K education, a racial equity and social justice bill that was signed, some initiatives to support our businesses, especially now with COVID. And like many other jurisdictions, Marc initiated a task force to reimagine police safety. Before this, he was on the county council starting in 1987 and was an elementary school teacher for 17 years in a Title I low-income school. So he has seen firsthand what low-income food insecurity and housing insecurity does to children's ability to learn. So with that, Marc, I'd like to turn it over to you, and I'll see folks on the other side for Q&A.
Thank you. So these are really strange times we're in. There's no doubt about that. This is not exactly what I pictured I would be spending most of my time doing as county executive. The intrusion of coronavirus has been truly astounding. And the lack of leadership at the federal level has just made this much worse of a disaster than it should have been. So appropriately, I'm going to kind of start with a discussion of COVID-19. We're 7 months into the pandemic, and Montgomery County has had more than 23,000 positive cases, and we've had over 800 people die. I put that in perspective because I think I was talking to some people from Taiwan the other day, 23 million people, 90 deaths, or maybe 90 cases. It's just insane. San Francisco, very similar, very few deaths, not nearly the spread, but they all locked down early and stayed locked down for a longer period of time. Montgomery County is, we've been averaging for the last 3 days, 98 cases a day. The good news is our test positivity is 2.1, which is a very, very good rate of test positivity, but the number of cases is actually higher than it was when the governor went into phase 2. That's partly a function of testing more, which is a good thing, but it also tells you how deep the infection is in the community, and that's not a good thing. So we know we've got cases out there, and I always remind people that those 98 people from this morning's report probably didn't know who they came in contact with that had COVID, because then this is the danger with COVID, it spreads silently. If you are sick, you don't necessarily have symptoms. If you're young, you may not have symptoms or only very mild symptoms. And so people are coming in contact with folks who have COVID without knowing they have COVID, which makes it really important for us to get everybody tested. We need to understand where the virus is in the community so we can get people into quarantine and really do what we need to do to stop the spread. Comparatively, when this started, Montgomery County and Prince George's County were probably, we were contributing more than half of the state's cases. We've dropped well below that now. The focus has shifted to the Baltimore metropolitan area. But if you take our 7-day average cases per 100,000 residents, we're at like 8.5. So that would translate into 8.5 times 11, roughly, or by 10 and a half, which is why we're close to 98. The District of Columbia is at 9.4 cases. Anne Arundel is 10.2. Baltimore County is 10.7. Prince George's County is 10.8. And Baltimore City is at 11.9. Under us, Fairfax is at 8.3, or compared to our 8.5. Howard and Frederick are both at 8.2. So we're kind of in the lower end of the spectrum of big jurisdictions, but it's still more cases than we are at all comfortable with. One thing COVID has for sure done is exposed all of the racial equity fault lines in the community. The fact that the death rate among the African-American community is as large as it is really speaks to the, just a long-term lack of access to healthcare, the living conditions in the Latino community, overcrowded housing, multiple generations and multiple families in the same apartments helps contribute to their high rates of infection. And ironically, the fact that both a lot of the African-American community, the Latino community, are essential workers who've been going to work every day has put them at more risk for corona than anybody else. And I always say seriously that they seem more like expendable workers the way we treat them than essential workers. They're the folks with the least pay, the least health care, the most dangerous living conditions, and they're the ones who go to work every day. And the construction sites continue to be a big problem for us. We also know that it's affecting school because their minority kids are less likely to have access to internet and good internet. So if you're Zooming your lessons and you've got multiple kids in your house and you have all of them in school, how many families have multiple computers, one for every child, or have an internet system that can handle that much load on their home systems? And at work, again, the disparities, the greatest numbers of layoffs have been in the lower income jobs. They have not been in the high income jobs. So many of us have been able to telework. The county's a good example of it. We went from virtually no teleworking to being able to have about 75% of our workforce teleworking. And we pivoted that in a matter of weeks. And that happened all across industry, but it doesn't happen on construction sites or Home Depots or grocery stores or any of the other places where a lot of these people work. We've been doing, I think a lot. We've, have $183 million in federal money we have to spend out. We've provided over $28 million in small business assistance. We're in the middle of a reopen Montgomery grant program, so we're providing money to small businesses to help them reopen. Sydney Katz and I had worked on a for business initiative before the coronavirus hit, and a lot of that stuff is actually being incorporated into what we do in dealing with the coronavirus. So the one thing I'm really happy about is we continue to make reforms in procurement and how permitting operates. We've gotten actual praise from some very large companies that needed to do expansions and actually expressed concern about whether they should do them in Montgomery County, and we were able to get them done quickly and expeditiously in the way we're supposed to be able to do it. So I was very happy about that. We have not opened live performances other than incidental music, but we are watching the DC pilot. They're piloting live performances in 6 venues. And we're going to see how their pilot looks, what happens when it expires at the end of October, and see what their evaluation is. And since we're so similar, we'll build off of what they do either way. And we also did something really unique. We opened a store in Montgomery County, a personal protective equipment store. And we sold to businesses, to nonprofits, and even some hospitals, gowns, masks, sanitizers, all kinds of personal protective equipment. And we sold it at cost because a lot of people were having trouble getting these supplies and also having trouble getting them at a reasonable price. And when COVID hit, I told my people I wanted us to buy not on a 2-week cycle or 1-month cycle, but to buy enough so that we had an inventory in place for the next round of COVID, because we all knew that round two was going to come after round one. And I'm happy to say that, we have the supplies in stock. We've been able to help other people, and we're not going to be desperately running out to get new supplies. We can continue to buy, but we're not in a desperate situation. So I'm glad we were able to help people. And I think we probably had the only store the government was running for business in the country. We provided $10 million in child care assistance. We provided $3 million to medical providers. We provided $8 million to Latino and African American health initiatives to bring testing and follow-up into their communities when we realized that we were not able to reach as deeply through the government as community groups were able to reach. And that's been really eye-opening. So we've opened 8 hubs around the county. And one of the things that's going to come out of this is we will probably permanently decentralize some of our health and human services initiatives so that the initiatives are closer to where people live and everybody will not have to go to Rockville to attain access. So this is one of the things where you do this and you learn and you decide this is probably a good idea to do going forward. And again, it was one of those things where people said they couldn't imagine the service hubs until we said you have to do the service hubs. And then they imagined them and made them work. We've put out $25 million in rental assistance and money for eviction protection. It is probably a third of what's going to be needed, and we have no ability to provide the other 2/3. And we're hoping either that the state steps in, but really hoping that Joe Biden is president on November 3rd, and that Congress very quickly in January enacts assistance for local governments, both state and local, because all of us are going to be seriously hurting. We are going to, because people's incomes are going to be knocked down for the tax year ending December 20, we're going to see a hit on our income taxes in the next year. And if we don't have assistance from the federal government, our budgets will not be able to be sustainable. And that's not a good thing. And to have that happen at the moment that needs have gotten so more important, that's not a good place to be. So it's, COVID's made us rethink how we work, but I'm really proud of, the employees in this county. People have been able to pivot and figure out new ways of doing things. And, we're learning from this. It's not just a bad experience, but it's, what somebody once said, what a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. It's making us rethink how work gets done. We are also, we've got recovery committees looking at government operations, business and economic development, education, health and human services. We actually have 2 economic development committees, one looking at immediate recovery from this, but also another group looking at long-term economic development in the county. I keep telling people every problem we had before the virus hit, we're going to have when the virus goes away. So we need to keep planning as if there's going to be a tomorrow, because there is going to be a tomorrow. And we don't want this year to be a pause. We're trying to do, walk and chew gum at the same time, do both the missions that we have to accomplish. And through all this, we actually got rated. We had to go in front of the rating agencies this summer, and we maintained our AAA bond rating, which is another good thing. So that's sort of my overview of the COVID. It's could be a lot worse. It's not where any of us wish it were, but we're not seeing the horrible spike that some other places are seeing, and that's a good thing. The budget is interesting. Our revenues are better than the worst forecast, which is not to say they were as good as when we did the budget, but unlike the May forecast, which predicted an utter disaster for the county and for state government and all counties, it didn't turn out that way. And I made a decision early on not to panic, not to start shutting down government services, because when I saw what the federal government was doing with the unemployment insurance and the $600 a week bump that people got, and realized that with the additional $600, people were actually making more money than a lot of them made when they were working, and all this income was taxable, that we were not going to have the kind of parallel loss of income taxes that occurred during the Great Recession, because then the average unemployment check was $390. Now the average unemployment check was $1,000 a week. And so we calculated that it would not be as bad as we thought. It turned out it wasn't as bad as we thought. We're still not going to have a banner year in revenues, but we're not going to have a disastrous year in revenues. And we're going to know better in November when we get the big distribution of income taxes from the state. And in December, we're going to get the distribution of the property taxes, and we'll see what the effect of reassessments are. But we're going to have less of a hit this year than we thought. And the question is, how much of a hit are we going to have for the budget that we're putting together for 2022, which is the year that starts in the summer of 2021. So we're waiting. We've been very careful. We were the first jurisdiction that cut off all procurement and froze hiring. We did that as soon as Corona hit. We were very careful about, we realized there was no point in hiring people who we would then pay not to work. So we've basically ridden with a higher level of vacancies than we ever have, but it's helped get us through this. And the other good thing that's coming out of that is we actually have labor management teams working with a consultant to reimagine the workplaces. I had planned on doing this with 100 jobs when we put it into the budget, but we're actually going to do it with more than 100 jobs. We're looking at all the vacancies we have and basically working with our workforce and asking people, if we didn't fill this vacancy, how would you get your jobs done? And what would we have to do to make it possible to get the jobs done if we don't fill the vacancies? I'm not looking not to do what we're supposed to do, but this is a perfect opportunity to look at how our workplaces are structured and what we could do if we added technology to some of our workplaces. We are very, very backward. I can't emphasize how backward we were technologically. So I think we're going to be in a better place, and this is going to be an ongoing process. Our workforce understands that we have to do this and that it's necessary to preserve jobs, and it's better to preserve jobs than fill vacant positions. And if we can all figure out how we work better and smarter, it's going to be a long-term benefit to the county. We have been doing budget forms. I just finished the budget forms on the operating budget. This year and last year, we changed the county's pattern. The previous tradition had been to do budget forms after the county had developed the budget. So it's like, thank you very much for your input, but our work is already done. So we decided we would actually take people's input at the front end of the budget process rather than at the end of the budget process. And that'll help inform some of the decisions that we've got to make. But we have three upcoming forums on the capital budget, October 13th, October 26th, and October 28th. And this deals with the capital budget, all the things, schools, transportation, all the big projects and small projects that the county funds. So keep your eyes open, pay attention, and if you have input, please share it. Elections. We've got this election coming up. I want to tell you that all of the regional folks are in the process of meeting on election security, both for election day and also for the potential aftermath of the election. There is a lot of concern of what could happen election night and what might happen in the days that follow the election. And this is a concern shared by all of the public safety agencies in the region. So we've been having public safety meetings and strategizing, and most recently they had a meeting with the FBI to get a picture of what they see or don't see coming down the line. And obviously we have got two big ballot questions in the county. We've got the question A and B choice and the question C and D choice. The council and myself are unanimous in supporting A and C, and we're opposed to both B and D. So talk a little bit about C and D quickly, because that's just the composition of the council question. I think C strikes a good balance. I felt personally that the districts have gotten too large. County council members district was now over 200,000 people when you only had 5 council members. and going to 7 will reduce the district sizes to about 150,000. At the same time, it keeps the 4 at-large members, and there are people who feel that at-large members provide a broader perspective and make the council a little less parochial. And the option D would turn it into all 9 district council members. And I think having some balance of at-large members is preferable to having no at-large members. The bigger question, obviously, is question A and question C. And hopefully many of you have voted already, and you're voting for, not this, it's question A and question B. And hopefully many of you have voted already and you're voting for question A, and please vote against question B. This is a really complicated election, but I want to tell you a little bit about where we are in the current structure of taxes in Montgomery County. Many people thought that we had a tax limit in place. And of course, many people also get these assessments that result in 10% tax increases. So the current tax system we have never limited your tax increases. What it did do is limit the ability of county government to raise revenue. And because of a peculiarity, the misinterpretation of what the charter actually said for 30 years, we shot ourselves in the foot. We've lost over $200 million in revenue that we should have been able to collect over the last 30 years that we did not collect. And basically what the law right now says is the county's limited in raising property taxes to last year's property tax collections times the inflation rate. And exempt from that was new construction and increases in value due to rezonings. For 30 years, the county never captured any of the rezonings. They never looked at what happened after property was rezoned, after master plans, did not capture a dime from any rezonings over that entire period of time. And then to make matters worse, because Montgomery County has a 3-year phase in of property taxes, we were basically catching the first year of new construction. And if it was phased in over 3 years, we were not getting the other 2 years as new revenue. That was supposed to be new revenue that came in above the calculation based on last year's taxes. So we were supposed to realize new revenues from growth in the county and then use those revenues to build our base like every other jurisdiction in the DC area does. Montgomery County didn't do that. We are unique, and we're unique in the worst possible way. So for example, when Marriott comes online and they're fully assessed, they will pay their share of taxes, but probably half the taxes they pay will not be new revenue. They will displace existing revenue. We actually have had to reduce our property tax rates every year to keep our total collections below the charter limit. That is crazy. And in the worst year, when they make a mistake calculating what the property taxes will be, even though it's a mistake, even though the numbers we were provided by the state in terms of assessments turned out to be wrong by the time they went out in tax bills, we misestimated, I think the year I came in, something like $60 million. And we don't get that back. And that lower number became the base for the next year. So we have really shot ourselves in the foot with both our interpretation, but also with the law. So now your choice in front of you is, you could take the bad law and you could go from requiring 9 members to vote for any increase in the taxes to not allowing any number of members to vote to increase the taxes under any circumstances whatsoever. So basically, whatever taxes you collect the previous year would be the taxes you collect the next year, adjusted for inflation. I can tell you that school growth doesn't match inflation. The cost of construction doesn't match inflation. Health insurance doesn't match inflation. There's a whole bunch of stuff the government does that does not match inflation. And that's a big issue when all you get is last year's revenues plus inflation. The other alternative is to require that it takes 9 votes to raise the tax rate. And that's what question A does. It says that you cannot raise the tax rate unless the council has 9 votes. What it means is that if properties appreciate in value, that the appreciation increases the taxable revenue that comes into county. It means when Marriott and other companies recover, it means when businesses, all businesses in Bethesda, for example, benefit from the construction and the growth of economic activity in Bethesda, that we would actually realize the increase in taxes from the increases in those property values. Right now, we don't do that. So we are in a bizarre situation where we're not even able to capture the growth of the investments we make in the county. So I'm asking people to please vote for question A and please vote against question B. And it's important to vote against B because if you only vote for question A and ignore B and other people vote for B, it is entirely possible that both A and B pass. If A and B pass, then we're stuck with the current system with all of its warts. That means no growth in the tax base, no realization of the revenues that come from commercial growth and from reassessments. All of this will not happen. So Montgomery County's future pretty much depends on this. And I want to show some charts just so you can get a perspective on where Montgomery County is compared to our surrounding jurisdictions. This chart shows property tax rates in Montgomery County. We are the bottom yellow line. Anybody who tells you that we are the highest tax jurisdiction in the region, they are not telling you the truth. We are the bottom line. Frederick is the green line. Howard County is the brown line. Charles County is the orange line. And Prince George's County, you hear all about the Trim Amendment. Well, that's Prince George's County. So all these other jurisdictions have higher tax rates than Montgomery County does. And sometimes a lot higher tax rates than Montgomery County does. And you can see that little peak in 2017, that's when the council voted to increase taxes to try to meet some of the needs in the county, and residents got angry and put in term limits. And since then, our property tax rate has dropped. Just follow the yellow line down. So that's the effect of not being able to realize the increases in property value. In order to keep our rate below the charter limit, we had to decrease the tax rate. So we're not even raising what we would have been able to raise if the tax rate in 2017 had stayed the same. And this is, you can just see this up and down from Montgomery County over the years, much more extreme than anybody else in this chart, much more extreme. Next chart. So this is, comparative rates between Montgomery County and other jurisdictions, not just Maryland jurisdictions. So there's Montgomery County, they're in yellow. Our tax rate, including the state tax, is $1.10. Arlington's tax is $1.22. And Howard County's tax is $1.36. Prince George's County tax is $1.48. Fairfax County's tax, that's $1.68.5 in Tyson's Corner. And the district's tax, these are commercial tax rates, I'm sorry, is $1.85. So yes, $1.85 in DC for commercial property, $1.68 in Tyson's Corner, $1.48 in Prince George's, $1.36 in Howard, $1.22 in Arlington, and $1.10 in Montgomery County. So you wonder why Virginia can build infrastructure? Look at the tax rate in Fairfax County. That was a deliberate decision. They've got a base tax rate of $1.15. They have a tax on all commercial property in Fairfax County to pay for transportation that's 12.5 cents. And then they've got additional special taxing district taxes in Fairfax that pay for transportation improvements, both rapid transit and road improvements. They pay $1.68.5. That's what commercial property pays versus $1.10 in Montgomery County. So when you wonder why we can't fund our schools and we're not able to match the transportation investments of our neighbors, look right here. Next chart. These are the residential taxes in the region. And so the bottom line is DC. So DC's at 85 cents. DC's at 85 cents because commercial property in DC pays $1.85. So DC gets a lot more money off of commercial property, which helps fund their budget in ways that we don't have in Montgomery County. Montgomery County is the yellow line. And you can see that we pretty much match with Arlington County, which is the salmon. I'm going to call that salmon. I'm not sure whether the bottom line is salmon or this line is salmon, but it's salmon to me. That line there kind of matches our rate now, but look where they came up from. They were way below us in 2011, and then their taxes radically increased so they could do the things they needed to do over there. The green line is Fairfax County. Their residents are paying $1.15. This line here is Loudoun County. Their residents are paying $1. Hard to read that. $1.05, I guess. And Montgomery County is right around $1. So you can see we are not the highest tax jurisdiction by any stretch of the imagination, and we're not looking to be. Next one. And this just shows what's happened to Montgomery County taxes. The blue line is just the county taxes. The orange bars are the state taxes. And the total at the top is the combination of the state and county taxes. So you can see that we're actually, again, down from 2017. We were at the 2017 levels pretty much back in 2004. So we were below where we were in 2004. So we're not realizing the kind of revenues that we need to realize in this county. And it's really impaired our ability to meet basic needs. And of course, at the end of the day, if you don't build the schools and you don't deal with transportation, then it has major impacts, as we all know, on our ability to attract development to the county. And I think, is that the end of my slides? I think it's the end of my slides. So I'll just say, one other thing about just COVID and relations with the state in general. Despite the fact that the governor and I have differences of opinion on immigration and on how we handle COVID, we've been a little bit more protective than he has. He started out on the right foot, but he's kind of given in to pressure in ways that we have been able not to. Both Montgomery County District and Prince George's County have kind of moved pretty closely together as we deal with this and separated ourselves from the state. Most of the jurisdictions in the state, which represent more than half the population of the state, I'm talking about Howard, Anne Arundel, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Prince George's, and Montgomery County, and Frederick, none of us have moved to phase 3 like the governor did, because none of us felt our numbers were safe enough to do that. So we've all been more careful. But for all of our disagreements, we actually work really well with the governor's staff. And so on economic development issues, we've been able to work pretty well together. Even on transportation, even though I do not agree with widening of 270 and the Beltway, the way the governor proposed it, we still work with them on our other transportation projects and have had a pretty positive relationship. Our housing people were able to work with his folks in the housing department. So we have ongoing dialogues and a good working relationship. And I do give the governor credit for being able to disagree, but not become disagreeable. Not everybody does that. And he's actually been pretty pointed in his disagreements, but continues to work with us. And that's been really helpful for the county. I just wish he would listen to us a little bit more on the health stuff. And I guess with that, I think I'm pretty close to 20 minutes and I want some time for questions. So I'll stop. Oh, I got to talk about reimagining public safety. This is really important. I did a forum last summer and brought in people from the community to talk about the policing in Montgomery County. And it is very clear that there are deep rifts in the community about policing in Montgomery County. Some people have chosen to focus on the police union and LIBOR and discipline. And I want to just quickly tell you why I've not focused on that to the same extent. Most of the complaints that we get about police never get processed and they never get disciplined. Most of the stuff that are disciplinary issues that that the chief is dealing with and we're having this debate about don't have anything to do with the interactions of police and the community. They're things like an officer drives a car to North Carolina, gets a DUI and wasn't supposed to have the car, his police car on vacation anyway. It's discipline for things that are not related to what happens in the community. What is disturbing to me and why I've chosen to focus on something else is that most of the complaints that people make go into internal affairs and they're investigated and result in no action taken against the officer. And what we find, and what Marcus has actually written me, is most of the time IAD, Internal Affairs Division, finds that officers have behaved consistent with their training. And so my emphasis is on, and we've done this, the council's given us the money to hire a consulting group. I've created a committee with 45 voting members made up of citizens and staff from the county and from police departments that do not get to vote on this, but give us advice and give us information. We're doing a top to bottom review of the police department. We're looking at the hiring procedures. Why is our department still so white? We're looking at promotion. Who gets promoted? What are the criteria for promotion? How do officers get evaluated? What's the basis of a good evaluation? Is it how many tickets you write? Is it how many stops you make? Or is it what kind of community work do you engage in? What do you do that's positive rather than focused on arrests? I want to look at the training. Two quick things, we continue to harass Black kids for pot. There was this allowance that if you smelled pot, you could search somebody. And so you didn't actually, because you can't prove you smelled pot. All you ever had to do is say, I smell pot. And then you got a search. And I asked, why do you do that? And particularly, why are you doing this with the kids? And the answer I got is because we can. We don't know whether they've got 10 grams, which is not criminal, or 10 pounds, which might be distribution. And so if we say we smell it, then we can go ahead and search people. That is not the way you're supposed to do policing. The other thing they do, and these are pretextual stops. This is where you've got a light out, maybe you're missing a tail light, maybe you're missing a license plate light, and you get stopped. I can guarantee you that me and none of my friends and nobody I know who looks like me was ever asked when they were stopped for a taillight and given a repair order, you don't have a body in the trunk of your car, do you? You wouldn't mind if I search your car, would you? And then continue to get pressured to get searches. Certain people get pressured to get searches. Many people get treated like I get treated. And I can't imagine that, that none of you have ever been stopped for something like a taillight or a turn signal and never had to go through pressure to get a search on your car. All of that was trained for. These weren't rogue officers going out and doing horrible things. These are things for which they actually had training classes on how to get these searches. So I'm going to do a thorough review of this department so we deal with it top to bottom. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Reminder, if you want to add some more questions, although we've got a bunch, please put them in the chat at the bottom of your screen and address them to WDC Q&A. Okay, that's a lot of material, and we're just going to jump right in. Some specifics that hopefully you can knock out quickly. When was the 30-year budgeting error picked up? How was it picked up? Maybe by whom? And where are the cuts happening specifically these days?
So when I was on the council, somebody had told us that we weren't going to realize the revenue from merit, but we never understood. We didn't get the explanation that we needed. Last winter, when Rich and I were, dealing with the budget and wondering where the hell the money was and why we didn't have the revenues that we expected, we actually went back and re-looked at the charter, because this is governed by a charter amendment that the council passed. The council passed this in 1990. And we realized that the way we were collecting money violated the language in the charter. So we called down the people who in the county government were responsible for that. And they had to be convinced they made a mistake. They flat out made a mistake. And at the end of it, everybody realized that the language was very clear. New construction and reassessments were exempt from the charter cap, And it didn't say they were only exempt in the first year. It says new construction, you get all the revenue, you get the new taxes from new construction. They just took the first year and didn't take the other 2 years. Our tax system wasn't set up to track the other 2 years. Could have been set up to do it, but it wasn't. So we figured it out.
Okay. Okay. There's a lot on police reform and also some testing and COVID thing. Let me throw a couple at you. Is there any system for testing out-of-state family members who are visiting in-state family members? And a broader question, if the ACA, Obamacare, is struck down by SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, how does that affect the county in terms of people who have pre-existing conditions, who may be on Medicaid, who are 26 and under on their parents' insurance? Is there any county level impact?
So I guess the first question about testing, we don't discriminate if you want to test. So, and it would be against our, if you're coming into a family and going to circulate in the family, we want everybody tested. So if you come here, you can either go to the private centers, get tested, CVS and a gazillion other places are doing testing, or you can go to one of the county places. We're not asking for proof of residency as far as I know. As far as SCOTUS goes, if they kill ACA, everything that affects everybody else in the country affects us here. The only, I wouldn't call it a saving grace, but, we've got a system of clinics in place that, for years served not just the immigrant community, but served, people who didn't have insurance in Montgomery County. And ACA kind of relieved us of that, but did not deal with the immigrant issue. If people start losing their insurance, we've got a clinic network in place. It's, it's not bad. It's not the same thing as going to Kaiser, but people can get basic health care there. So, and it'll of course increase the county's costs to do that. We were kind of hoping it would go in the other way. Biden gets elected, extends coverage to everybody. And then the county doesn't have to provide clinics for people who don't have insurance. But if whatever bad thing they do will affect everyone.
Okay. Helping restaurants as the weather turns cold, and corporate or large landlords asking them to give some kind of rent relief to small businesses. These are kind of tied in together.
Yeah, so there's some landlords who've done that and some landlords who didn't. Like the landlord for Harp and Fiddle in Bethesda basically insisted that even though he went from making a substantial amount of money every day in revenues to a couple $100s a day, insisted that he had to pay all his back rent. So he's gone. Other landlords, I know the Levin family in Wheaton and other places have been partially forgiving of the rents that people owed them to help the small businesses survive. So that was, but that's, on an individual basis. The county's done a couple of things. We reopened to 50% capacity. We originally allowed them to serve alcohol after 12 o'clock. Then we discovered that people weren't behaving. The places were turning into bars after 10 o'clock. So we ratcheted it back to 10. Now we've put in place a system where you can opt in to opening till 12, but you have to provide somebody of your own to police the place and make sure that we abide by all the rules. And if we come in and you're not, and we find that people are not socially distancing, not wearing masks, pulling tables together and all that other stuff, then we've said that we're going to shut them down and we're going to fine them. There will be no second chance. So we're giving them an opportunity, and we're working with all the restaurants on the outdoor dining. We're going to permit tents. This is all new territory. Who knows how to design a tent or what to require for a tent that'll keep people safe? But our guys are working on this, and we're trying to figure out what to do. We're going to have regulations that'll let them open up. So hopefully, good news is that they'll be able to maintain some outdoor capacity through all of this. But I don't envision going to 3/4 capacity anytime soon, particularly not with these case rates.
That feeds right into the next question, a two-part question again. Did the store that you opened to sell at cost PPE to businesses, Has that ever run out of supplies? And then a related question, is the 2% positivity rate that you cited based on the state formula or the Johns Hopkins formula?
So it's based, we're based on state data. So I would basically almost double it if you were using the Hopkins formula. I wish the state was using the Hopkins formula because it's more accurate. The Hopkins is basically, they're looking not at the number of tests you took, but at people. And so if you have a person who's getting tested, they're negative this week, and say they're tested over 5 weeks, in the state formula, that counts as 5, the percentage is calculated with those 5 extra tests in mind, as opposed to this is your rate per 100,000 people, not 100,000 tests.
Is that a function of wishful thinking, or are a lot of states doing that?
No, I think it's wishful thinking. These are the things where I've got quibbles, because the CDC guidelines were that anything above 10% of 10 cases per 100,000 would be considered a high rate of transmission, and anything over 5% in test positivity would be considered a medium risk, and under 5 was low. So we picked a way of counting cases that put us in a low risk category for the positivity rate. But for tests per 100,000, there are 3 or 4 counties in Maryland right now with their schools opening that are well above 10%. And that's a choice. I mean, those were the guidelines, and the CDC pulled the guidelines down. They were originally the governor's guidelines. He doesn't talk about them anymore. He just says Maryland's ready. Maryland's rate now is at 9.8%. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if the whole state rate creeps over 10%.
I wonder if it's worth pointing out to folks, when you and the other jurisdictions following your lead declined to move to phase 3, that you're using Johns Hopkins calculations versus the governor's calculation as he prepares for his possible presidential run.
Yeah, we keep thinking about the original CDC guidelines.
Good.
Good. They've been so politicized that it's criminal.
Let's see. What is your take on the fact that the state of Maryland has the highest incarceration rate for African-American males in the entire country?
I think you've got a police system that is designed, this is why I raised the issue of, pretextual stops and what we do to young Black kids. These are all deliberate policies. And, it's hard to imagine who concocted these things and what they were thinking when they did it. But we know that in the 90s, there was this, radical assertion or reactionary assertion that, we need to criminalize everything we can possibly criminalize. And this state is slow to move out of it. We passed the first ban the box bill in Montgomery County because we wanted to, end this thing where these folks are carrying around these criminal records.
Why don't you explain what ban the box is?
So ban the box meant when you went for employment forms typically had a box on the form that said, have you ever been arrested? And a lot of times, if you check that box, you would never be called in for an interview. And studies showed that if you didn't have that on the form and somebody came in for an interview, if in the course of the interviews, somebody asked the question, you said, yes, I was, people were still more likely to hire people they liked out of the interview process than simply say, well, I'm not hiring you because you've checked this box. So it's helped people get beyond having this record, prevent them from being hired at the very outset of things. We need to go to expungement though. We need a radical expungement program. There's no reason why people should carry misdemeanors on their record for years and years and years, and no reason why you should have pot on your record, frankly, for years and years and years. It's just nuts, and it makes you unemployable. And if you're unemployable, what exactly do you expect people to do to make a living? I mean, you want to say, well, no one should commit a crime. But I think of Jean Valjean. I mean, none of us would argue that Jean Valjean was wrong about, getting bread to feed his children. We've created a situation in this country where if you can't work legitimately, there are a lot of people faced with the question of like, how do I put things on the table? And it draws people into, a seedy underworld that once you're in that world, it's hard to get out of. So I'm a big believer that, we should expunge things. We shouldn't arrest. I think we arrest far too much in the county. I think that's been a problem. And hopefully, if we're successful in what we do with training and, re-examine what we arrest people for and, how we deploy our police, that we wind up bending that curve back. Otherwise, everything you've heard about the police to prison pipeline is true.
School to
prison pipeline.
Yeah. Let's see, women across the country are paid less and increasingly leaving the workforce in order to take care of children and family members with lower earnings already on their background and a break in their professional lives. What is workforce planning doing at the county level to try to support or mitigate?
So, we're reconstructing the workforce development program. For years, the council was extraordinarily unhappy with the way it was going, and I was extraordinarily unhappy with the way it was going. And so we have reconstituted it, and we really want to focus on, upskilling people and reskilling people. And so that if you're out of the workforce because your job disappeared or because those numbers, you just need a better job, we're looking at how do you bring people the skills they need, not simply try to find the job for a person who is where they are. So for a person without an education or with limited training, we were kind of focused on, well, given your training, what can I find you? And we're trying to reverse this and say, given where you are, what do I need to do to give you the skills that would make it possible for you to make more jobs available? And this is, a county-wide issue. It affects women. It affects minority communities who were not well served by the previous incarnation of our program. Hopefully, they'll be better served now.
Well, I guess the focus of the question was primarily on the disparate impacts on women, given the background in lower wages, which other groups suffer from as well. But the fact that women are leaving the workforce and not only impacting their family's bottom line, but also interrupting their ability to get promotions and get raises.
Well, I can't stop them from leaving the workforce, but I mean, we're going to need to have a plan to get people trained and hopefully to have jobs come back, so that this universe is not permanently shrunk. I do expect to see a change in some workplaces. I mean, it's clear that people are learning. It's kind of like with the recession when people big companies laid off 10, 20, 30,000 people and then did not hire them back because they discovered they could be profitable without all those people. One of the dangers now is that, as people adjust and discover new ways of working, they will not require the entire workforce they had before. So we're going to have to be looking at creating new opportunities, not just hoping that recovery lifts all boats.
Okay, and then this is going to have to be the final question so I can get to my closing announcements. Talk a little bit about where the cuts are happening given a shrinking budget, a shrinking income from the state, the county, and the feds.
Well, so far, I mean, the only cuts we made were in programs that we weren't going to be able to run. So we took away money we had some of our advisory groups, had money for, refreshments and things like that, or we had money in recreation programs that we were never going to run. So that was the really low-hanging fruit. And we'll continue to look at things that we don't think are going to be open for the rest of this year or going even into next year. And hopefully we'll make those decisions a little bit later so we know what the virus looks like in January. Is it going to look the same as it does now? Is there a vaccine or isn't there a vaccine? Is there a treatment or isn't there? All those things change what we're going to decide we're able to do. I've told people that, we need to stay away from Health and Human Services. And this is where, we're also focusing on, can we take the high number of vacancies we have, work with the people in the departments and figure out how to do the job without filling the vacancies? And if we can do that, even if it means upskilling our people in more technology, it would enable us to maintain the services without having to cut as many services. I really don't want to cut things because, in my budget, I can't touch the schools. So 3 billion and 6 billion is off the table. By the time you take out interest payments, retirement, health benefits, and all that, another 2 billion is off the table. The county only has a little less than $1 billion to pay for all of its essential services like fire, police, health, our Department of Health and Human Services, housing assistance, environmental. All of that comes out of 1/6 of our budget. And that's where the cuts start coming from. So I am hell-bent in trying to figure out how we do other things before we cut services. And so I've not committed. I've seen scenarios. I've told people to start looking for where they could save money. But the emphasis on, can you do this and still maintain the service, not are you going to kill the service altogether?
Okay, well, Marc, thank you. We've had so many questions, and I know we've done our best to try to sort through them. There's no way we can get through them all, and I urge folks to follow up with Marc's office if you have outstanding questions remaining or need more details on what you did here. Some closing announcements. Again, we are going to have a number of opportunities that are listed in, and have been listed and will continue to be listed on the WDC website. Our upcoming Zoominars, I want to remind folks that we've got some terrific programs coming. One thing that I've neglected to put on here is October 22nd, we are co-hosting an event on the broken parole system in Maryland. And that is an event, it's on our website, and it's next week, shortly thereafter. Should be a terrific program. It's put together by a law professor who is a member of our task force on racial equity in public safety. Let's see what else. Join us for these debate watch parties. And it turns out we are having an event on the 15th, co-hosted by Maryland Women for Biden, as well as MoCA Women and WDC. And so we will just watch uninterrupted our Democratic nominee talk about his plans upon his election. And speaking of getting him elected, we've got a whole lot of GOTV stuff coming, and it's on our website. The fun one would be Stephen Colbert. You can Google him for Better Know a Ballot, and he covers Maryland in addition to others, pointing out that this is our chance to choose our neighbor in Washington. Mobilize is a large organization across the US that has needs, is calling for people who can help with translations, with phone banking, with poll watching. There's also Swing Left, which is trying to secure the fact that the idea that everyone can vote, that every vote will be counted, and that any irregularities are investigated and resolved. You can track your ballot at MD Voter Lookup, and that's the ability to see if it's been sent to you, if it's been received back, if it's been processed. You can also go to I Will Vote, all one word. And please remind folks that if they are mailing in their ballots, as long as it's postmarked by November 3rd, it will be accepted when received for up to 10 days, so long as that postmark says November 3rd at the latest. So I hope you will join us in keeping on and getting your friends to tell you what their voting plan is. Spread the word on the ballot questions. You're for A, against B, for C, and against D. And no more excuses to this group of activists for not phone banking. The alternative may be 4 more years of Trump. So decide which makes you more uncomfortable and pick the other one. So that would be phone banking. And contact your friends in swing states. Who do you know in Pennsylvania, Florida, North Carolina, Colorado, Montana, Alaska? You know the list. And our final announcement that I'd like to point out is October 15th, Maryland Women for Biden is hosting a phone bank, October 14th, tomorrow night. Maryland Women for Biden is hosting its phone bank with Shannon Watts, who is the founder of Moms Demand Action. So that's going to be on the website as well. Shannon Watts is a terrific kickoff for the phone bank tomorrow night, and that's at 7 o'clock. And then the 15th, of course, is our watch party for our uninterrupted presidential candidate. So with that, thank you all very much. Thank you, County Executive Elrich.
Thank you.
We send you our best wishes for dealing with all the things on your plate, and see you at the next WDC event. Thank you all.
Indeed.
Thanks,
Goodbye,
Marc.
everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive.